more people online, and I think we better start the meeting. So I'm holding up the flag, and the gong has been sounded. And if everybody will recite after me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under
God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
And as Rotarians, I think everybody knows that, well, except for perhaps Sarah. We say the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Number one, is it the truth? Number two,
is it fair to all concerned?
Number three, will it
Will build goodwill and better friendships?
And number four,
will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Something we all wish that our politicians would at least read the first one, if not the second, third, and fourth. Anyway, I don't really have any announcements. I did meet with Mike Shanahan, who's the president-elect of the Yorba Linda Club, this morning for coffee. We had a real nice chat. He's been president of the Yorba Linda Club before, and he's been recycled into it. So we chatted about a bunch of things and some of the problems he was having with the fundraisers, and the same problems we're having is that we just kind of killed our fundraisers. So they have the Lobster Fest, which is where I guess they taught us how to do the Lobster Fest, or at least shared the information with us. He went through some of the history of the Lobster Fest and the fact that it was there was some promise made not to have it the same day, and there's apparently as I was mentioning earlier, the current president of the Yorba Linda Club. When I mentioned where I was from and I wanted to talk to her about Lobster Fest, she turned her back and refused to speak to me again. So I discussed that with him, and he says, yeah, it's still a sore spot with a couple people in the club, and she's one of them. But I buried the hatchet a long time ago with Roger on that. So anyway, but we're dealing with a county that's population-wise is the size of Oregon. So the fact that two clubs, you could probably have 5 clubs do it the same day, and it wouldn't affect the sales of any of them, in my opinion, because there's nobody that goes to the same Lobster Fest. I mean, if you draw people within more of a 5 or 6 mile radius, I'd be surprised. But anyway, hurt feelings are hurt feelings. In any event, moving along, does anybody else have any announcements of things they want to bring up? See shaking some heads. Okay, yeah. James.
So you guys are all probably aware the Show Some Love Tustin program started on Monday. So our first restaurant is Mesquite Tacos and Fuego. My wife and I ate there on Monday night, and it's super good. So I would highly recommend going and picking up some Mexican food. I got the Mesquite burrito, which has a chopped up chili relleno in it, which I've never had before, which is amazing. And my wife got the shrimp tacos, which were also great. And the coupon was honored. You get free guacamole or a free drink when you go and order a burrito. So I'd highly recommend going and checking it out. So that's underway. We were the top story on the Chamber newsletter this week. And we're on the Chamber website, and then obviously all of our social media. So it's getting some good visibility. The businesses are really appreciating it. So I would hope and ask that you guys go and so that's the landing page on our website. So just reference the coupon, and they can get you a free drink or guacamole and chips when you go.
Great, thank you very much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And then again, just to one last plug is if you guys know anybody, so I'm going to open it up to the rest of the chamber. But again, if you guys know any business owners that might benefit from this or might want the support or want some help, please let us know. I'm happy to give them a call and coordinate what kind of a special and stuff like that. So we have a couple lined up. Like Luna Rosa is going to be next week. But anybody else that you think might benefit from this or might need help, please let me know. I'm happy to give them a call and try to schedule and get them a week of highlights. So let me know who I can help.
Sure to get me that info as soon as you can.
Well, I'd like to
Yeah, I'll send
apologize. I should have introduced our guests. I've invited some members from other clubs in the area because we're having a presentation on 501c3s, which I think is interesting to every Rotary group that has a foundation. And also Lane Calvert. I'd like to welcome Lane.
Always a pleasure.
So Ross Minion. Like to
Hey guys,
welcome.
doing?
And then there's somebody that says owner on here. I'm not sure who it is.
Hi, I'm LJ Sibeli from the Monroe Beach Rotary, and I see Brandon down there as our president, and I'm the vice president this year.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Brandon Wise, welcome. And then Harish Murthy, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can have some good information. All right, and unless there are any other announcements, I'll introduce our speaker, Sarah Efthymiou. Is that right? Is that close?
That's very, very close. Efthymiou.
Efthymiou. Anyway, I've been working on it. Anyway, Sarah provides pro bono legal services to nonprofit organizations and groups that want to form new charitable organizations. She helps build the capacity of organizations that serve the Public Law Center clients, and she works for Public Law Center. She's an attorney there. And Orange County's low income and underrepresented communities in general. Additionally, she teaches seminars on how to start nonprofit organizations and collaborates with community nonprofit technical assistance providers to hold a number of other legal educational seminars. Sarah is a graduate of the University of Redlands and the Syracuse University of Law. Prior to joining PLC, she was in private practice with a focus on business and corporate law. And I've spoken to her extensively about the 501c3s, and I believe she knows what she's talking about. So, Sarah, if you would take it away, and Gary, if you can put her on the share screen program, then mute everybody, then we will listen to you. Sarah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Fred. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me to your meeting today. And a special thank you for not having me follow Katie Porter. That would be a tough act to follow. So I'm glad there was some distance there. Anyway, so I'm recognizing some names and faces from other clubs. So I must admit I was a little confused when I first joined and I saw some others. So, but I'm glad that everyone else is here as well. So. Like Fred said, I am a staff attorney with the Public Law Center, and I work with nonprofit organizations as well as low-income small business owners in Orange County. So I have, in addition to doing presentations for various Rotary clubs over the years in Orange County, I've had the privilege of presenting at the District Assembly a few times. I presented with Mark Brubaker. I don't know if any of you know him from Irvine. So I missed this year's, but prior years I've done a presentation for treasurers, and it's really, I love speaking to Rotary folks, and I just admire all the good work you're doing. So thanks for having me today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let me just get into slideshow mode. Here we go. Right, so, and just what I'd say, I have a number of slides here that I thought I'd go through with you, but feel free definitely to jump in if you have questions. Is that all right, Fred, or would you rather folks just operate through the box? How do you usually run things? Oh, I think you're muted there, Fred.
Yes, I am. It's different with every presenter. Whatever you feel comfortable with. We've got until 1:15, so we've got a fair amount of time. I don't know how much your presentation is, so we've got about 45 minutes, a little more than that, about 47. So if you'd like to allow questions during your presentation, that's fine with me.
Okay, well, with that, I'd say I love it to be interactive, so I'd say just jump in and ask away if anything comes up of that you want more information about, or you just have a person, an experience with your club or foundation that you want to highlight. So with that, I just have my contact details here. I'll go ahead and make sure they're in the chat box as well if anybody would like to follow up with me afterwards. But you can either reach me. We are still working primarily remote from PLC. I'm in my office today, but for the most part, you can reach me through email or even through my direct number.
Okay, and just to put it for everybody, we'll have everybody stay on mute, and then you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or just raise your hand and wave or something. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to start with is just to talk about the difference between the 501c3 and the 501c4. Now, this is something that I know all of you know already, but I just thought to set the stage, just having this up front, it's very important to, with regards to what we're going to be talking about next. So the Rotary Club is a 501c4, meaning you are a social welfare organization. As far as donations that are made to the club, they are generally not tax deductible to those donors. Okay, now in certain cases, the dues that you pay as club members can be taken as a tax deduction, a business tax deduction, but not a charitable deduction. And then on the other hand, the club foundation is a 501c3. Now, 501c3s are charitable organizations, typically public charities. In contrast to the C4, donations to a C3 are tax deductible to the donors. Now, even though the club and the foundation are both public benefit corporations, okay, that's how both started in California, they are classified differently by the IRS. So just to put it out there, the club itself is the C4 and the foundation is the C3. Now, this last bullet point at the bottom of the page with the C3 mentions that the foundation is a separate organization. And that's really going to be the focus of today's presentation. Making sure that the two entities are indeed kept separate. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and talk about what it looks like and what it should look like when nonprofits are working together as affiliates. And I like to refer to this as happy families because like with all families, when you have two people or more than two people who are working together, sometimes things can get muddled and lost in translation. So the point is really when you're working as affiliates with C3s and C4s, you want to keep everything happy and you want to keep everything in compliance. So really there are three guiding principles when you're structuring the relationship between a charity that's exempt under C3 and a social welfare organization that's exempt under C4. And these principles, and we're going to go into them in quite a bit of detail, would be first of all to keep maximum feasible separation between the two entities. And this is both in the legal sense and the financial and operational sense. Secondly, it's important to avoid any subsidy by the charity, by the C3 of the C4 operations. And then finally, making sure that the day-to-day control stays within the appropriate entity. So one is not seen to be controlling the operations of the other. And why, I guess it's important to explain why is this important? Why is it important to keep that separateness and follow these principles? Well, it's to make sure that, you know, the IRS definitely, but also courts and other administrative agencies will indeed see the club and the foundation as two separate entities. That protects the assets of both organizations, and it also protects the C3 status of the foundation, which is very critical because this is your main fundraising arm, and it allows you to do a lot of the charitable activities that that Rotary wants you to engage in. Now, saying that, these principles are guiding principles. Okay, they aren't absolutes. So so as you're doing an assessment of your club and your foundation, it's important to say, well, what are we doing right? Yes, Fred.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you have the same board of directors and the same officers in both the C3 and the C4?
You know what, I am going to talk about that. The short answer is yes, but it has to be done very carefully.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question. You
Sure.
mentioned the second organization that would be the overseeing organization. What was that again, please?
Well, this would be just, my point was to keep them both separate. So one would not necessarily, you would do have situations where there is a controlling entity, and that's usually whoever was set up first. So with regard to Rotary, it's typically the C4, the club is the controlling entity over the foundation, the C3. But despite that, it's very important to keep that separate, that separation between the two.
No, I meant you said IRS would be the one organization, and then the second organization also something else you mentioned.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the IRS and also courts. So if one, let's say, you know, the C4 is sued for some reason or another, if there's not enough separation and it's seen really that the club and foundation are one entity, that means that the assets of the charity of the foundation could also be attached to achieve that judgment as well, to pay that judgment. Okay, so just that last point there, you know, keeping in mind as I'm going through these principles, what is working well. If it's impossible to meet all of these principles, then, you know, the best way possible, make sure that where you're doing things right, you're doing them very well, which will you know, be further evidence of the separation. Okay, so let's look at these now in more detail. So looking at the first guiding principle, that the C4 should be a separate legal entity from the charity. And this is established through a separate incorporation and through separate operations. Now, since the club and the foundation are separate corporations, this first part is met. Okay, so then let's look at the second part, which is to maintain separate operations. And what does that mean? Okay, so first let's consider corporate formalities and governance, and then we'll look at internal operations. Okay, so part of establishing that you have two separate entities, that you have that meaningful separation, is by observing corporate formalities. So this means that the boards of the two are meeting separately. You have separate board meetings, you have separate minutes of meetings. If you have committees, that those committees meet separately. Okay, so you're acting as two true corporations. Now I know there was a question, Fred, you had the question about overlapping board members. And the answer is I'm going to have the lawyer answer it. Really, it does depend on the particular situation. So completely overlapping boards of directors are not legally prohibited, but we advise strongly against them. Okay, and it goes back to this principle that if the same boards are governing two separate organizations, it's apt to get confused. Okay, it's less likely that you're going to truly be able to keep them separate. Now, saying that, many affiliated C3s and C4s will have a few overlapping directors, and that's absolutely fine. And there may be important strategic reasons to do that, to make sure that the mission of both are aligned. Okay, so to prevent that mission drift.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Gary.
So in our case, what we do is we have the same board members on both the C3 and the C4, but the difference is the president and treasurer are different people. So the president of the C3 is the past president of the C4. So each year it transitions the same as it does. And we have different treasurers. But in our case, we used to have completely different boards, but the problem was that the board for the C4 never changed. And years and years and years would go by, and there would be a completely different set of priorities for the C4 board than the C3 board. So we wanted there to be more alignment. And so in our case, we kept the separation, but we changed the people controlling the board each year.
Right, and that's a good example of when I said these principles aren't absolutes. You have to make them fit your practice. So in that case, if you do have an instance where you have a significant overlap, again, not recommended, because it's always easier if you have completely separate boards, because then you're going to have separate meetings, you're going to have separate minutes. But if you don't have that, if you have that strong overlap, then you have to take those extra measures to make sure that you are meeting separately. Even if it's a matter of scheduling different meeting times. You have different, you mentioned you have different officers, different leadership, that's helpful as well. But as many practical precautions that you can take will be better. I just wanted to say with my Zoom, I don't have, I can only see 6 boxes at a time. So if you do, if you're raising your hand, I might not see you. So you might, if I'm ignoring you, just shout out. That's the reason. Okay, so those were maintaining the corporate formalities and governance. What about some logistical operational tips? Well, another way of showing that you are separate, entities are separate, is through corporate records. So maintaining separate bank accounts. Okay, always a good idea. Whether the bank accounts are separate or you're using the same account, making sure not to commingle or transfer funds without an appropriate and definitely documented reason to be doing so. And just some other practical tips. Let's see, the mailing address of the C4 should be different than the C3. Okay, again, going to that separateness and the distinction, even if it's a matter of using 2 different PO boxes. Okay, this is going to be evidence that you can bring back to the IRS if it is queried. The last point here, joint websites. I have a question mark at the end of it, because I always get this question: can we have joint websites if you're advising us to have separate addresses? And the answer is, again, it depends how it's presented. Really, entities, the C4 and the C3, so the club and the foundation, should have separate internet presence on the internet. Now, saying that, I know I took a look at Tustin-SantaAna's website, and I know it's not separate, but there is a link to the foundation on the club's website. And I'd say that's not impermissible. I think, that certainly the IRS will allow joint websites in certain circumstances. You just want to make sure that it's properly presented through the use of separate banners and different content. And you want to avoid the public confusion of the two. All right, and also sticking to this this principle of separateness, we're still on that guiding principle number 1. We want to make sure that the funding sources and fundraising activities are distinct. Okay, now this doesn't mean that you can never have joint fundraising efforts. It just needs to be considered and proceeded with very cautiously. Okay, and this is important not only to establish separateness, which we've talked about, but also to prevent the C3 from inadvertently subsidizing the C4 club, okay, which is impermissible. And we're gonna carry on to that topic next. Okay, and this brings us to our guiding principle number 2, which is the charity may not subsidize C4 operations, even though the C4 can subsidize the C3. So we can go the money can go one direction, but not the other. So we want the club to be supporting the foundation. And if the club decides that a certain amount of the dues, member dues from the club go into the foundation, that's absolutely fine. It just can't go the other way. So the club's operational expenses cannot be supported through charitable funds that are held by the foundation.
But the grants that we give out could be given by the foundation or written by the foundation rather than the club, right?
Yes, and thank you, Lane. That just got me to the next point here. It's a great segue. So there is an exception to that statement I just made. So when the C4 club is engaging in charitable activities, so if what the club is doing is paying for scholarships or other charitable, I'm sorry, I can't think of it off the top of my head, supporting small businesses, other charitable activities that the club is engaged in that case, then the C3 could make a grant to the C4 to do that. Now, what we want to make sure, though, if that happens, it's not just a transfer of funds. Okay, you want that to be very carefully documented. So the best way to do it, this is what I recommend as a nonprofit attorney, is to actually have a written grant agreement that the C3 designates those funds to go to the C4 for that specific charitable purpose. Okay, and this again, is more evidence that the C4 is not subsidized, or the C3 is not subsidizing the C4. It's actually in furtherance of charitable activities.
That could be in the minutes.
Ideally, it would be a separate agreement. It would be a separate document. But, again, like I said at the beginning, these aren't absolutes. So having it specified in the minutes are better than nothing. But best of all worlds is to have a separate grant agreement.
Yeah, I have a question on that, Sarah. If the C4 historically has given scholarships to kids for college or whatever, or has given money to the Police Benefit Association or individual policemen for things that they did throughout the year, could that be just as easily done by the C3 Foundation rather than doing it through the C4?
Yeah, absolutely. What's important, as long as it's in furtherance of the mission of the foundation. So depending what's in the language, what is the purpose of the foundation, what is its tax exempt or charitable purpose, if the expenditure is in furtherance of that, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay, what if it could something like that, let's just take scholarships for example. Let's say we give away historically 10 scholarships of $1,000 a year to kids going from Tustin High School to colleges. And could the foundation give the $10,000 for those things back to the C4 or not?
Yeah, so in that case, that's an example of, now we're assuming, now just to backtrack, the club can still give money. The club can decide to fund scholarships itself. Right. It's just what we're talking about here is using money that's held by the foundation.
Right.
Okay, so just to set that clearly. Yeah, so that would be an example of where a C4 would grant funds to the C4, to the club. The foundation would grant funds to the club to distribute. So it would be a charitable activity of money that was held by the C3.
Okay. Well,
so yes, permissible. It would need to be documented. My advice again would be through a written grant agreement.
Okay. Now, if you want to avoid that, can't you just transfer that project to the C3 and say the C3, the foundation, is now going to make these grants? Wouldn't that be easier?
Yeah, it would definitely be easier, unless there's something that prevents that from happening within your corporate organizational documents.
Okay. So if our corporate organizational documents are written vaguely enough to cover just about anything, then it wouldn't be much of a problem, would it?
Yeah, I mean that would certainly be a way to avoid having to grant funds from one to the other.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sarah, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One is, you were talking about transferring money from the 3 to the 4 to cover costs of a project. Wouldn't you just run the project through the 3 and any sort of operational costs of doing that project would also legitimately come out of the 3? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then the second question specifically about scholarships, when I was researching this 10 years ago when we got our foundation, I thought I read that the foundation could give scholarship money but could not select the scholarship recipients. So what we've always done is had the high school faculty or the community college faculty shoot, you know, we'll say we have this much money, you choose who gets it and how it's allocated. And that's how we handle that. Have I misinterpreted that and we could in fact make the selection?
You know, there is, so the IRS does have a distinct schedule for charities that give scholarships. So that's why I think that's why I mentioned when it's important to check your organizational documents. If for some reason the foundation was not, did not tell the IRS it was going to have a scholarship program, it would either need to do so now or check if the C4 indeed was the one that had approval to do the scholarships, then the money could be transferred to the C4. So I think that's probably what you had read.
Well, and probably, like Fred said, he has a very vague, global, loose, all-encompassing sort of document, which I'm sure is the same one we have. So yes, maybe we're missing that. And so basically we're making the contribution to another organization to give scholarships.
Well, and that's another thing. So are you running the scholarships where the Rotary is selecting from a group of applicants, or are you donating the funds to the school foundation, the district foundation, who then decides who the scholarship recipients are going to be?
We have one of each. So at the community college, we give money to their foundation, but the scholarships are presented in our name. At the high school level, they don't have a not-for-profit entity. But we have the teachers, like I said, we have the teachers select the students and the amounts. And then we just give the kids, we give scholarship checks that are only given to the kids after they present proof of enrollment in college.
Right, so I'd say, Lisa, I think this is a program I think we'd want to just take a closer look at.
Okay, thank you.
Just to, okay. It's very fact specific. Just to make sure that when the board has delegated that kind of authority to a non-board member, which is the groups of teachers, I assume high school teachers.
Yes.
There just needs to be some procedures in place to cover yourselves and to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
That they're doing it properly and they're not engaged in discriminatory practices and all the things. I'm sure they're not, but all the things that the IRS is very concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so definitely reach out to me after.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Could that problem be solved by the teacher recommending to the 501c3 and then the C3, gives the money based upon the recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, what I always recommend, if you're not donating it to another C3 to distribute as scholarships, but you're giving directly to the students, having a scholarship committee within whether it's the club or the foundation, who is going to be responsible for reporting them to the board.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I had a quick question, going back to your grant agreement. Is it possible to just have a kind of like a boilerplate grant agreement and just fill in the dollar amount every year for the project? I mean, whatever is allocated by the foundation, and that be kind of like a global agreement between the foundation and the club? That was my first question. And second, actually, I just want to check and see if you will be addressing issues with respect to fundraising by the C4 for the C3. Will you be addressing that at some point?
Yeah, yes, I will do that, Harish, but let me answer your first question. So it was, phrase it again, just so I.
Well, yeah, so is it possible to have, like, for instance, we have most of our funding from the foundation goes directly to other nonprofits that we grant funds to. Some funds go, like what Lisa mentioned, they go directly to recipients in some cases. And in some cases, it goes towards expenses related to projects undertaken by the C4. Now, what we're doing is, and even for those expenses, for the most part, we are just writing checks. These are all like, it could be small checks. And instead of doing that, could we kind of write a global grant agreement between the C3 and C4 and say, here's $5,000 towards expenses for all projects, or we can list it out and say, these are the projects undertaken by the C4, and this is all the money that you have to pay for the expenses based on the project budget that's been submitted.
Okay, I understand. I would not recommend doing that, because really, let's take an example of your lobster fest. So that's, from what I understand from the Lobster Fest, the club puts it on. So the C4 puts on the event, and then the proceeds go to the foundation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So in that case, the foundation could not reimburse the club for the expenses of running the Lobster Fest. That would be the responsibility of the club. Okay. So really, in that case, the club is putting on the event for the benefit of the foundation of the C3. If the C3 was had to pay the expenses of the event, then really what the club is a professional fundraiser that the C3 is then engaged. Okay, so that, and I'm not sure if this is what you were asking or not, if I'm going into a different track.
Yeah, I maybe I need to word it correctly. We want to do, let's say, a project with the 211 Marines or some other organization. But we're going to incur some expenses, let's say, for instance, in putting together baskets that are going to be donated to these 211 Marines. But the expenses for the baskets are part of the budget that we've allocated for the 211 Marines. Now, we have a choice. We can either write the check from the foundation to whoever is paying for those items that are going into the basket, and then essentially it covers it from the budget. The other option, which is what I was referring to as far as granting to the 501c4, is to write a check for $1,000 to the C4 and say, this is monies you can use to buy things for the baskets that you're going to be donating to the 211 Marines. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, yes, not the ideal way to proceed. It's possible. You would want to make sure, because what the charity is doing in that case is, paying for services that the C4 is providing. So you'd want to have that documented exactly, what is being provided and how much money was being spent by the C3 for that. You'd also want to make sure it was fair and reasonable and fair market value. So, I mean, yes, so short answer, yes, it can be done. Not the ideal way to do it. And you'd want to make sure that the documentation was all in place.
A question, Sarah, on
Sure,
back to Lobster Fest. How practical is it to consider that any sponsorship money for the event would go to the foundation, but admission tickets for the event, the cost of the admission tickets would go to the club and become money available to the club that would pay for expenses incurred for the event or anything else the club wanted to use, so that we split out. So donation money as sponsorship, so the sponsor can take the tax deduction, that money would go to the foundation. But then the general admission ticket to the event would go to the club.
Right. Yes, you're talking about a joint fundraiser, and that's absolutely fine. It's done all the time. You just want to make it very clear to people who are, whether it's the sponsors or the people attending the event, where the money is going. Is it going to a public charity where they can take a deduction, or is it going to the C4 social welfare club? So as long as that's very clear, that's fine. And then you also, okay, one more point. And you also want to make sure that both entities are paying their fair share of the expenses.
Okay,
Very
so
good.
for the last 11 years, we've been doing it like we sell the tickets from the foundation, because the value of the ticket is actually more than the lobster is worth, right? So if we're charging $100 for the ticket, but the fair value of the meal might only be 40. So technically $60 of that is a charitable donation to the foundation. So that's how we've been handling it. All of the income has been to the foundation, and then the foundation has either paid the expenses directly or reimbursed the expenses in order to put it on by the C4.
Right. And so, yeah, so what we just want to make sure that what's being reimbursed, because it's not the C3 is not putting on the event, the C4 is putting on the event, and the C4 is providing services for the C3. So we want to make sure that there's an agreement in place, or an MOU, whatever you want to call it, some kind of documentation, an MOU, agreement, service contract.
Sounds like we could get a lot of lawyers on staff.
Yeah, and we have templates for this.
Yeah.
Again, with everything just documenting all the time.
Sarah, wouldn't it be easier for just the foundation to put on the whole thing and not have the C3 involved at all, or the C4 involved at all?
Yeah, I mean that could be, or like Dick was talking about, having having the joint fundraisers. So the C4 is fundraising for the club programs, and then the C3 is there running things for the charitable foundation, charitable donations.
So a question on then liability. So if under Rotary International, our clubs are covered by insurance as the C4, but our projects are paid for and run by the C3, is the C3 and are the projects covered?
For like the particular event?
Yeah, if we're doing an event, if we give a donation to something, if we pay for material through the C3 for a project, if donations are being received and then expenses paid out and donations given out of the C3, but the C3 is not a club and not covered under Rotary International's insurance. So are we opening ourselves up to liability by operating our C3 without a separate insurance policy?
That's a good point, Ross. So yeah, so before the C3 starts engaging in activities and putting on events, insurance is going to be an issue. So in that case, it would make more sense for the C4 to actually be holding the event. If the insurance isn't there, and you're not able to offer a certificate of insurance to the park or wherever you're having the Lobster Fest, say.
Well, how about just a project? So say we've got a $10,000 project for whatever we're doing, and we're paying the expenses directly out of the C3. We're calling it a C4, the club project. This is by our club, but the checks are coming out of our C3.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult to pull off.
Okay, so
it's not only for insurance reasons, but just, it's not going to look right.
That's kind of how we all operate. So I'm trying to figure out how do we correct that? How do we?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty standard throughout the entire district.
Yeah, I mean, most of us probably all have the same boards. We may have separate minutes, but they're consecutive meetings. There's very little difference in our club. Anything that's a club expense gets handled out of the club accounts. Anything that's a project or project expense is getting handled out of the foundation accounts. But outside of that, all operations are the same.
Yeah, and I'd say there, we're getting into the nuances and the particular facts, but the overall principle here, if you just keep in mind that you have two separate entities, and according to the IRS rules, a C3 cannot subsidize C4 activities. So keeping that in mind, if, every time funds are transferred one way or the other, just ask yourself, are we using charitable donations for a non-charitable purpose?
Right. Well, I don't think we intermingle the funds. The funds never get transferred. It's just that if the club is doing a project, whether it's making blankets or donating school supplies, the check is coming out of the C3 to pay for that.
For the supplies and
Whatever it may be, any project we do, all expenses, at least for our club, everything, all expenses for projects come out of the C3, whether it's operational expenses, whether it's a donation, whether it's supplies we're purchasing and donating. The club's expenses and funds are only for club operations, and that's, you know, meals and dues and stuff like that.
right. Okay. So let me give an example here. Just going to back to the Lobster Fest, because that's what I'm looking at right now. I have your website up. Let's say it's the joint. You know, we're raising funds for both the club and the foundation. And let's say you had to spend $1,000 on lobster, and it was the foundation that the C3 that paid the $1,000 to buy the lobster, or reimbursed. But the club actually took part of the proceeds in the club account to pay for club expenses. In that case, that would be improper because all of the money was used, all of the expenses were paid in that case by the C3. But it's different if what you're doing, yeah, you're making, you're paying for blankets, and the club is, even though the C4 is the one that's delivering the blankets to the charity, the C3 you know, pays the expenses of those blankets because it's a charitable project. In that case, it's okay.
Could you, talking about the insurance, going back to splitting the way that you run the Lobster Fest, again, all of the sponsorship money, the major sponsors, minor sponsors, all that money would go into C3, but the entry tickets would go into the club, the C4, and that would allow the club's insurance to cover the event then, I would think. Because
I believe so, and I think with your, if I'm looking at the advertisement correctly, it says that the net proceeds of the Lobster Fest will go to the foundation. So that implies that that would be after the insurance costs and lobster costs and everything else. So it would be a straight donation from the C4 to the C3.
But by having the tickets come in, having the ticket money come in to the C4, it allows the club then to utilize the Rotary insurance to cover the event. Where if it all went into the C3, we would have to take out a separate policy for
Sure.
the C3 for the event. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would be an expense. So it would be, yeah,
Well,
part of the gross expenses.
if that's an accurate depiction, because we actually do receive all of the, as far as I know, we do receive all of the sponsorship money directly into the C3, but it's the C4 that it puts on the event for the benefit of the C3. So it's still the C4's event for the benefit of the C3. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
C4,
and that's the way it should. That's the proper way to do it.
yeah, and that is the way we're doing it.
And that covers the insurance and those other issues. Yeah, so typically when we have the affiliated relationships, we see that the C3 is the controlling party and the C3 is the one with the insurance and the C4 isn't. So it's a little bit different when we're talking about Rotaries.
Okay, we're running close on time here, so I don't know how much more you got to go.
Okay, let me run through. Oh gosh, I thought I would. I even added extra because I thought we'd have too much time. So the last point is shorter. This is the guiding principle number 3, which has to do with the, with the operational day-to-day activities. Okay, so we talked about legal control and legal separation, but also operational separation is just as important. So here we're going to, we can certainly have strategic control of one over another, but really one entity shouldn't be engaged in the day-to-day activities or management of the others. Okay, so what does this mean in practical parlance? Well, the board, the foundation's board and officers should not be directing the clubs, foundation, and officers to take certain actions, and vice versa. Okay, so we want to make sure, even where there's overlapping directors, that they are indeed having separate directions and operations and day-to-day activities. And you know, and this goes back to the reason that the separation is important. So so the greater the operational separation, the lower the risk of the IRS or the courts coming in and disregarding the two separate entities, and ultimately causing the foundation to lose its C3 status, which is so important and so critical. So with that, and not only that, but we also want to avoid confusion by members of your club and foundation, or by the public in general. So just taking caution to make sure there's not confusion there. And then I just wanted to, I think we might just have a few minutes here to talk about the distinction between C3s and C4s when it comes to political advocacy. So am I right to understand that there's no political campaigning or lobbying that goes on in Rotary?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So I won't spend time here. Just so do you know the difference? All nonprofits can lobby, but as a C3, as the foundation, the ability to lobbying is a lot more restricted. And of course, when it comes to political campaigning in favor and opposition of a political candidate, the foundation cannot get involved in all of those activities. The club can to a certain limited extent, but the C3 cannot pay for any of those activities.
You should maybe make that announcement on the news so that we can get all the other C3s in the entire country that are doing that to stop. That would be nice.
Well, and this is interesting that you mentioned this, Gary. So the reason that the C3s cannot get engaged in political campaigning is because of the Johnson Amendment, and there's actually been attempts to overrule the Johnson Amendment. So stay tuned. Things might change. We'll see. But there's bigger things going on in the community right now, so it's taken a back seat. Hi.
Hi. A few years ago, the IRS was really focusing on nonprofits for audits. What would the red flags be?
As far as the C3 specifically?
Well, either the C3 or the C4.
Okay, so since we're on this page right here, substantial lobbying by a C3 and political campaigning by a C3 is a red flag. That would get the attention of the IRS. The red flags that we are probably seeing, that would be seen most often when it comes to C3s, will be private benefit by directors. So that is, directors getting some kind of private inurement, benefiting from the entity, such as, renting out their space for profit to the C3, taking a salary that's not reasonable. So improper relationships, conflicts of interest, those are always big. Also, an area that might be relevant to Rotary, this could come up, the use of fundraising, professional fundraisers. Okay, this is an area, if you do outsource your fundraising activities. So if you're running a golf tournament, or even, the Lobster Fest, and you've decided to outsource it to a fundraising company, you have to make sure that certain procedures are followed, and that you don't delegate all of your authority to that company, to that council. So those are areas that we're seeing lately, and also being good stewards of charitable funds. That's why it's so important to maintain that separation, so that when donations and charitable funds are received by the C3, they're used for their exempt purpose, as opposed to supporting operations of another entity, which could be the club.
Thank you.
Fred, do we have time for a question?
Sure, I've lost track of time, Fred. You keep us on target.
Okay, we are at 1:15 now, which is typically the end of the program. do you have any more formal parts of your program to present to us?
You know what I was going to do next, I won't even bump the slides ahead. I was just going to talk about some fundraising hot topics, but we probably have another half an hour to an hour. So if that's something, I'd be happy to come back at a later date if we want to look at fundraising in more detail, but nothing else formally.
All right, then I think we're out of time. If somebody does have more questions though, why don't we go to them right now and add another 5 minutes and see if we can tackle any more questions anybody has.
So this is Harish. I want to just reverse what we had talked about as far as the Lobster Fest and the way in which the Tustin Club is doing it, and say, what if that money, for that matter, was flowing to the club, and basically we managed the whole fundraiser event. All of the monies was flowing into the club, and any expenses are deducted, and the net proceeds, as we indicate, and the net proceeds are transferred to the foundation as a portion that is raised by way of this particular event. That's number one. Number two is, if that happens, how do we, in essence, acknowledge the people who contributed for the portion that is actually put, a deduction that they could have got had they made the contribution directly to the C3. So there's two aspects of it, yeah.
Right. So to answer the first question, yes, you can do that. So basically, the C4 would be bringing in income, which is tax exempt. Okay, so you wouldn't be paying corporate tax on that. And then that would go into the club's bank account, and then you would decide how much of that to donate to the foundation as a grant. Okay, so that's absolutely fine. What you can't offer, it's a little tricky. So if you say some of those funds come in through sponsorship. Okay, so if it's sponsorship by businesses, then they can still take a business deduction even though they're donating to a C4. Okay, so that they might be fine with that. You're talking about the individuals who might otherwise take an individual tax deduction.
I want to give you an example of that because that might give you a little clarity on this. Let's say it's a golf tournament, and the golfer is paying for the golf tournament. He's paying a $250 fee. And the $250 fee, actual costs are basically the green fees, etc., which will be probably about maybe $110, $120, let's say $150, all inclusive. There's a $100 component, which is actually a charitable contribution. But the check is being written to the club because the club is putting on the golf tournament. Is it possible for that person to take the deduction?
Yeah, same thing as the lunch.
Right. Yes. So yes, I think in that case you would be able to, if you were clear that the difference. So after it's the quid pro quo, so they get their golf and their whatever that's worth, and then the difference would be the donation. And if you're very clear that the purpose of that, with the difference is considered a donation to the C3 Foundation, then the foundation should be able to write a substantiation letter, the receipt, directly to the participant. But the problem is then if the C4 then is looking for reimbursement for operating expenses. So I think part of the issue now is still how is the C4 going to pay to put on the event, right?
No, it's all the expenses that are incurred are very specific to that fundraiser. So it's not a club expense, it's an expense that's incurred for the fundraiser. So out of that $250, $150 expenses are directly related to the fundraiser. But we don't know this when we start. In a sense, we can't write that, we can't have the foundation write the letter even as soon as a contribution is done, that $100 of this is we've received a $100 contribution on your account. That's what I'm saying. So it happens only post the event when we know approximately about how much of the donations, how much of the contribution is deductible?
Yeah, so what I'd say, Arish, it's going possibly, I think we just have to tread very carefully on how it's presented to the participants. If it was just the straight, we knew how much all the club was doing was just being there, marketing the event and providing the insurance to be there, and everything else was, just straight, this was the ticket cost and this is what the ticket comes with, and then the difference then would just be considered a donation, then you would be able to tell the donor at the end of, as soon as that day is over, what they could deduct.
Yeah, I'd say probably not the day after, but maybe a little later, perhaps.
Right.
But I think I answered my question that, it just does make it just that little bit more of a gray area as far as how that could be an individual donation, right?
Right, and it's important just to be very, very clear with donors up front or participants in your event, exactly who their donation is going to. Okay, so whatever the difference between what they get for the golf, for the lobster, the difference, that's treated as a donation, and exactly, where that donation is going, and that's going to determine whether or not they can take a tax deduction.
Got it.
So it's up to so the club does need to decide, with these events, are they going to be purely, are the funds purely going to be raised for the foundation, or is it going to be a vehicle to raise funds for operating expenses of the club, or are the club's operating expenses solely funded through membership dues? So that's something that every club and every C4 is going to have to come up with.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, I've just popped my contact page up here, so do feel free to reach out. I always welcome questions from Rotarians. I know some of you here I've worked with personally in the past, so definitely feel free to reach out. A lot of times it might just be a question we can resolve just over a quick phone call or an email.
Yeah, we'll be giving you a call, see if you can do a program in Anaheim Monday noon.
I'd be happy to, Lane.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate all the help you've been giving each of our clubs.
Sure thing, Ross. Nice to see you.
Fred, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Sarah. And Elaine, if you do have Sarah up to your club, please invite us, because I think we could probably hear the same talk several times over and not exhaust our questions. And I think we'll have Sarah back at another time to go over the parts that she didn't cover. And because I think this is an interesting area and one that we really need to become a lot more familiar with. I certainly have as many questions now as I had before we started, I think. Anyway, thank you very much, and thank you. And I didn't see Lisa when we started this, so I'd like to welcome her. Lisa,
Thank you for inviting me.
Pardon me?
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome, and I'm glad you could come, and I appreciate the fact that we've got a lot of people from a lot of different clubs here, so we could work on this. And I would appreciate invites to other people's clubs meetings on Zoom so that I can attend your clubs and pick up more information, because Rotary's a learning experience, and I need to learn a lot more. I've been at it a month now, and this is the first time I've been a president, so I'm not a recycle. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. So any help I can get, I always appreciate. In any event, I would like to thank everyone for attending. It's been very interesting. And Sarah, we really appreciate your knowledge in this. It's just been wonderful to hear somebody that's an expert on this very complex field. So without further ado, I will gong the bell and wish everyone a safe and happy week till we meet again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.